Right, next we've got our last speaker for today. We've got André Post as Manager of Geospatial Management and Acting Manager of BI for the Ministry of Primary Industries. That's quite a mouthful. Okay, welcome aboard.
Right, yeah, like the others, thanks for giving me the opportunity actually to talk about these things. I think the initiative is actually really interesting and quite pleased to actually support this as well. As I said, I'm Andre, I'm from the Ministry of Primary Industry, so I know most of you sort of from the regional government space. I'm from the central government space, so probably have a little bit of a different view about things, but hopefully not too different. So what I want to do is actually set a little bit of context. What actually does MPI actually do? What does it mean for us? And then actually sort of classify it as a case study. What actually have we done to actually make this data available? What button do I press? What? Right, okay, I'll get there. So, yeah, introduction. So, want to give a few user stories, some examples of how we use data, our strategy and what we want to achieve. Real-time data, which is particularly important for us, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And then sort of the geospatial and the BI program of work, which includes the GIS portal and the GIS applications we're actually pushing out. Traditionally, MPI has been pretty good at actually getting data and managing the data itself, but it has been pretty crappy at actually putting it out and making it available. So I think that's a pretty common story. So what does actually MPI actually do? So Ministry of Primary Industries, we look after fisheries, we look after dairy, we look after beef, we look after the food safety, fisheries, border control, compliance, policy. So there's actually quite a wide range of things we do, and consequently we have actually lots of data, lots of applications as well. On our main system we've got over 400 main applications that actually deal with these things in some form or other, which means we have about 460 main database systems in our system. Half of them I don't even know the names, so let alone actually knowing exactly how they all work together. So what we're trying to do is actually build some common capability to actually integrate these things and actually do something about it. So some user stories, some context to give you an idea of what we're involved with. Some of them you might actually not realize. So we've got a communication center which actually monitors where vessels and fishing vessels operating in the New Zealand environment actually go, also where trade other vessels go. We work quite closely with the Navy to see where do we want surveillance, where do we actually want to board ships and things like that. So we actually, under the CAMLA, we actually monitor part of the Ross Sea as well for the toothfish industry, things like that, tuna fisheries in the Pacific. So to do that, we actually get a lot of dynamic data in, and we actually make maps to actually give them to the Marine, to the Navy, to actually briefing maps. So actually those briefing maps take about 40 minutes each to do. We did it about 3 times a week in the season, so that's actually a huge amount of data. What we want is actually get that data in dynamically and actually have it on dynamic dashboards so that it actually becomes available much quicker, and so that people don't have to worry about actually gathering data, but actually can work on a strategic level. Where do we want to be, where do we want to surveillance and all those kind of things. Surveillance and incursion investigation. You all heard about the fruit fly response we had in Auckland. The process behind it, the manual map making, is actually quite slow. We actually spend a lot of time gathering data, and we throw a lot of people at it, and then we think, oh, we're doing quite well getting all this data, but it's actually very time consuming. What we want, again, is getting that data in quickly, get it on operational dashboards so that actually managers can actually talk at a strategic level, working with the data rather than having to worry about getting this data. So we want to have live operational dashboard, fast and secure access, because it's very sensitive information as well. We want to be very careful with the data itself, that it's actually verified before it goes out. We don't want to have false positives out there, because it can create a lot of economic damage as well, so you have to be very careful with that. And so we have to need quite a robust and secure infrastructure behind it to actually be able to do that. And traceability, which came up earlier as well today numerous times. So actually we want to know basically from paddock to fork, basically. Where does the beef come from? Where is it processed? Everything that happens to it, so that we can actually go back. MPI, we have a certification system as well, so actually that for export, and if things go wrong. A couple of years ago, actually, meat was sitting on the wharf in China, actually deteriorating away because there was actually something wrong with the verification system. So again, it's quite important to get these systems actually operational and effective as we can be. And of course, we want to share data with external stakeholders. MPI, a lot of data actually comes from industry, so we actually look up after data on behalf of the industry, so farms or fisheries catch efforts, so it's actually not our data, it's actually industry data. But we have some data that is our data, the aquatic biodiversity data, which is actually, the custodians of that data is actually newer, so they do all the scientific work and gather it, but we actually make it available through our portal as well. For instance, MPI, they do prospecting licensing, and so actually include that biodiversity data to inform them about whether it's a suitable place and what can happen with it. We work with DOC on consultation processes, so actually sharing of data, so making our data available externally is quite an important thing as well. Probably nothing new for you guys here, but that's what we try to do as well. The other project which we are working on is actually enriching business intelligence data. So within the business intelligence system, which is SQL based, we've got quite a lot of data, for instance, catch effort data. If you just have the core business intelligence system, it's just long tables of data. It actually takes quite an effort to actually link that up and actually show it on the map. But what we're doing, actually integrating that with the geospatial system, so that actually, instead of looking at these large numbers of rows, we actually can see it on the map and actually visualize it. So that actually requires quite a tight integration between the geospatial system and the business intelligence systems. And so therefore we actually bring these systems very close together as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So this was sort of the context of some of the examples of what we're doing, quite a wide variety. So we actually have quite a program of work which we do, but the program of work is not something we sort of dreamt up and thought, no, this is a good idea to do. So it's actually based on the information system strategic plan. So it's actually a corporate-wide program, or this is the strategic plan, which is based on the strategic intent of the organization as well. And I believe very strongly that whatever you do, if it's not linked back to your strategic priorities, then it's a waste of time of doing it. So this is actually quite important. And what it also means is the strategic plan, if we have that, and as a result out of that we have the data and information strategy, which talks about getting raw data into information, into knowledge, into better decisions. What it actually means, we actually have a funded program there, so that ISSP is 4 years old now. They actually have a 4-year plan, it's actually a 4-year funding plan as well. So I don't have to come back and ask for more money every year. Actually the money is already allocated and I just have to get it released for the specific projects, which is quite important, so I can actually think longer term, and actually makes it a lot easier to actually get those business cases through. To actually get the ISSP and the data information strategy done is quite a lot of work, but we're now in the second iteration, so we're actually now refreshing the ISSP and the data information strategy as well. And the geospatial strategy is part of that, and it's also linked to the New Zealand geospatial strategy as well, where you want to participate in the spatial data infrastructure, which you heard a little bit about today as well. Data is an asset. I mean, this was said before as well, but we very strongly believe that's the case. It's a critical resource. Without data, we're nothing, basically. So really, it's essential for many functions, and it needs to be managed at an enterprise level. MPI. The problem at MPI is that it used to be MEF, it used to be fish and food safety. They sort of brought together, and there's lots of amalgamations and splits and more amalgamations sort of over the last 10 years. So actually, within MPI, there's still lots of legacy and those stovepipe systems. Not everything we can blame on that, but still that is actually an issue that we try to work with as well. So how can we get those isolated systems more integrated? One of the things I did when I started a couple of years ago was actually look at the maturity. So this is a slightly different maturity model as you saw earlier. So I'm actually looking at sort of going from a reactor to sort of more leader one, but level 1, sort of right on the left there, sort of it is like an enthusiast level. So some enthusiast within the organization, got a copy of some open source software and start typing away and doing things. On the right hand side, the enterprise level is a fully enterprise integrated system. We are now at the end of, sort of, was talking about those stovepipe systems, so that actually meant that sort of a couple of years ago we pretty much in a departmental system, so still pretty fresh out of the amalgamation, still a realignment sort of going on, so we had lots of stovepipe systems, and it actually puts us quite clearly sort of in the previous state, December 2013, sort of in the departmental level 2. I think over the last 1.5 years to 2 years, we sort of have shifted from number 2 to number 3, so centralized. So we've put in some enterprise licensing. We've got now the basic building blocks in place for an enterprise system. We've got a central data warehouse. So we're actually moving to the centralized, and the next step, really what we want to do is actually integrate it, actually build an integrated system. So yes, we've got the basic building blocks, but how actually are we going to make these different parts talking to each other? So that's the next step, what we're talking about. So that's over the next, well, probably a couple of years. And I mentioned before, everything takes longer than you think, and that's certainly the case at MPI because things work at glacial speeds there sometimes, but we're getting there. So within the data and information group, which I'm sitting in, so we've got actually a series of major programs of work. So the 4, is this a laser thing as well? Yeah. So the information management future state ECMS, that's our document management system. So we're actually replacing an old legacy system. So actually the document management system is going to be SharePoint based, which also makes it easier to integrate with other systems as well. So that's a major project that's on the way at the moment. The open data program is not so much a technology project, but it's actually a set of policies and procedures where we actually need to do to make data more available. So it came up earlier in some conversation as well, farms online data, everybody wants it, everybody knows about it, but we can't release it because of the Biosecurity Act and things like that. Actually, as part of the open data program, we are actually working on making that data more available and sort of, if that requires a legislative change, then we will do what we can to actually push that through. Of course, it's not fully in our control, but we do what we can. So that's led by Annika Brunson at MPI, who lead that program. So it's actually pushing it out and working with other organizations to do that as well. Business intelligence, so that's a program that's already been going for quite a while. So we have actually built a data warehouse based, and MicroStrategy is our business intelligence platform. And so we're actually rolling out dashboards and online services as we speak. So we've got probably about 25 to 30 dashboards and various systems in there already. And it's just, we just keep going. We're actually moving now from a project mode into the more business as usual mode. So in the geospatial information, that's the geospatial capability project, our program. We sort of just at the phase where we actually build the basic building blocks, so the hardware and the systems is there, and we're now starting to roll out the online services. So that's where we are, and all that works towards a capability. If we really want to lift the capability of MPI in terms of data management, in terms of data availability and analytical capability, we really want to lift that up. We can't do that with some governance program foundations as well, so have proper steering groups and all that together. So there's also quite a substantial awareness stream going on as well. We were working quite closely with the comms people within the ministry and external as well to make build an awareness of what we're doing and what is actually becoming available. Because if people don't know that this is coming, then we won't get feedback. So I'm quite keen to actually get feedback from the various branches in the organisation. So when this opportunity to come to Invercargill came up, so I also make use to actually go and speak to the guys at the Invercargill office, because we've got fisheries officers here as well to tell them sort of internally what we're doing with the geospatial and the BI program, and get their feedback. Okay, what do they actually need when they're in the field? What actually do they require? So that's quite important to have that conversation going. Even though I'm looking after both BI and geospatial, my main area is geospatial, so this presentation is pretty heavy on the geospatial and not so much on the BI. So the geospatial program, it's actually a series, oops, that's the wrong one. So it's actually a series of projects. So the geospatial platform project itself is sort of nearly complete. We've got it in UAT. Once we've got those building blocks in place, then there's a series of follow-up projects that we need to do to really, release the benefits of the project. There's no point just building the building blocks and not doing anything with it. So there's some consolidation of departmental systems. So we have the Farms Online systems, which actually got its own database and reference database, the climate change information system, the ETS system. They all got their own sort of reference tool. So what we want to do is actually consolidate that with the geospatial platform so that they actually use it, the common data warehouse. Integrated incursion response system at the moment, that actually project is sort of taken out at the moment, sort of delayed. It's going to be a much bigger enterprise-wide project, but that's the incursion response system. Again, how do we integrate it with the common data warehouse? The National Aquatic Biodiversity Data, the NEBIS system, that's got about 800 to 900 different layers of data, in, fish, marine mammals, marine birds, invertebrates, everything. Yeah, it's already available, but it's a standalone system which is quite old. It's about 10 to 11 years old. Yes, it's available. If you Google NEBIS, you will find it. The data is available, but we want to actually incorporate it within the geospatial platform so that we can actually integrate that data with other systems much better as well, rather than just having it standalone. And then the vessel monitoring system, I'll come back to that later on as well, actually where data, the New Zealand operating fishing boats, where are they? And integrated enterprise image services as well. So we've got, especially in the forestry area, the use of aerial imagery is quite strong. So they use a lot of imagery. We've got about 40 terabytes of imagery in our system. But it's the way it's actually managed is very departmental. It's sort of suited for that particular department, and data heavy is used. But actually, I want to make it available to all of MPI basically. So how do we do that? So there's a project for that as well. So the undesirable state where we're sort of a little bit beyond it, but still. We've got these separate systems, very stovepipe with their own reference databases. So some of them we have a little bit of integration, but we really want to go from here to here, where we actually have a common data layer, and then we actually have some capability in the middle, the platform, and then we've got loosely coupled applications on top, which actually can talk to any database within that. So that's the vision where we want to go. So I'm going to get a little bit technical now, but hopefully not too much. And also, actually leverage external data from others. So we get, an image data service from MFE, for instance. We get, from NIWA, we can get data. We get, we're using the lens data service. So all those kind of things come in from the side as well. So this is the, more technical slide, but that's what we've got established right at the moment. So actually, this is the geospatial platform. So the more technical side. So, oops, that's the. Right, sorry about that. So we've got the data layer, and then we've got the geospatial platform itself with the service there. We've got a security layer, which is quite important in MPI as well. Believe that open data is good, then we want to share as much as we can. And through the open data program, we do have a policy to make it open unless we can't. But on the other hand, we've got a lot of sensitive information as well. So security is quite important. So we've implemented that through a security layer. And then on top, we've got the clients with the loosely coupled information. What we also have is the vessel monitoring system, which I mentioned earlier. So on any fishing vessel operating in New Zealand waters, they need to have a box that actually reports their location through the satellite. Actually, it's received. And then we've got a comms handler that decrypts that information, and that goes into the VMS, which is the vessel monitoring system. So we can actually see where every fishing vessel is that operates in New Zealand waters. At the moment, it's a standalone system. So really, we want to actually integrate that within the geospatial platform. So the way to do that is actually link these two up. So instead of that having its own interface, actually the data feed from there goes actually to what we call a dynamic management system, dynamic data management system, a data broker that takes various feeds in, and then actually feeds that data through to the same dashboards and clients that we're already using for other data. So which means that, when we have vessel information from the vessel monitoring system, we can actually overlay it with our own data, whether it's biodiversity data, whether it's our management zones, whether it's, even other dynamic data sources as well, because there's other dynamic data sources, whether it's vehicles or AIS, which is the worldwide vessel locations, which includes cargo ships and things like that as well. The COP, which is the Common Operating Picture, which actually comes from Defence with their observations as well, which is unclassified. Iridium is another new system that's looking for the power industry to actually look at as well. So if we actually can combine those dynamic data feeds within a common platform and actually push out through a standard operating dashboard, that actually gives us quite a huge advantage, we believe, and actually makes the data use much more efficient. So real-time dynamic data overlaid with static data as well. But real-time data is not just locations of vessels. It could be social media data. It could be trap data collected in the field by someone with a collector app, or it could be tweets or something like that. So there's actually various ways of getting their data actually into our platform. So the geospatial platform, what actually the user sees, so what you just saw is sort of the little bit more technical, the background, but what the user actually sees is it's going to be this. This is at the moment in test and development. It's not quite released yet, but we want to have a common platform where people go and they just, I want to know about Kari dieback, type in Kari dieback, and they get what data we have available. Initially, this is going to be released for the geospatial platform, but we actually want to bring the BI platform in here as well, so that actually if you search for instance, Kari dieback again, you don't just get a map application, you also get the BI dashboard and the non-spatial data resources we have for that as well in the same platform. So if you do a search, you get a result like that, which is technology we use here is supported for ArcGIS, but we're actually creating a separate front-end page. The code we stole from Environment Canterbury, with their permission, by the way. And also, if it's, for instance, it's hard to read, but if it's restricted data, you will actually be notified that it's actually the data is restricted and it's not available for public release. If you don't have access to the data because it's all single sign-on, you won't even see that the data is there. Through the data catalog, you can see that the data sits there and you can request access, but we actually manage that through that security layer I mentioned earlier. And then from there, you can jump into your resources. And at the moment, they are mainly the geospatial resources, the viewers and the maps. But eventually, it will actually include the BI platform as well. Mm-hmm. So what we, through the platform, to actually make all this data available, this is all based on the Esri stack. People might recognize this. There's actually a whole series of applications and template applications that we make available. So our collector app in the bottom there is actually for field collection. So actually, it's a standard out-of-the-box application you can just download. All you need to do is actually wire it up to the right data service, which we can provide through the platform. And people in the field can actually collect stuff. So we use that to collect where the signs are, because we've still got a problem there. There's a lot of signs out there. We still have Ministry of Fisheries logos on there, and which is not a good look, because so we're collecting that, and we use the collector app for that. We use the collector app for the Kari dieback project as well. So up north, actually go into the forest there and actually collect information about Kari trees, whether they are infected or whether they're not infected, whether they have any symptoms, etc., etc. Briefing book is another application that's available through the platform as well. So whether we want to brief ministers or whether we want to brief the public, we can actually use a standard template application. So all we have to worry about when we want to do some briefing, we just do the content of the application. We just write a text. The communications team can do that. They don't have to come to us to actually create an application, because the template creation application is there. And the dashboards, of course, that is very important for us as well. Operational dashboards, whether that's for managers or for operational managers or policy staff who whatever, sort of actually getting that data from wherever, whether it's static or dynamic, actually getting that in the right place, in the right format. Story maps, web templates, and all those kind of things are available. And this one, open data as well, so that is sort of a little bit down the track, but we actually want to release open data through we're going to use the Esri open data tools for that, and that will actually mean that we can make it available in whatever format. And there's a question earlier on, sort of, okay, what sort of formats do you want to release? And in our view, really release it in 3 different ways. And one is, you can actually download the data, whether in a standard format. So you actually download the data and do whatever you like with it. The second one is actually provided as a dynamic data stream, whether it's WMS or whether it's an Esri REST feed or whether that's an RSS feed or something like that. Doesn't matter. We provide, that system will provide the common ones anyway. And the third one is actually to provide an interface with it as well, because some people, they don't have software themselves, but they're still interested in the data, so you still need to provide some sort of an interface that actually interact with spatial data. So, and we believe through a system like the Open Data Portal, we can actually do that. And it's actually not that hard to implement the technology. What's much harder is actually getting the data structured in the right way underneath to wire it in. So, and we believe that GIS actually is very good at integrating all types of information, whether it's enterprise data from the BI or the social media, real-time imagery. So actually, and we're pushing it out through the portal, through what you just said. And of course, again, we want to integrate the business intelligence and the geospatial sort of as tightly as we can. So working with business intelligence, so GIS and business intelligence actually have quite a lot of things in common. And I remember a few years ago, I was working on the geospatial strategy for another organisation, government organisation, and they already had a business intelligence strategy, and I almost could sort of, search and replace BI for GIS, and it actually made sense, sort of, it wasn't quite like that, but it actually made quite a lot of sense, because we all work with data, enterprise data, and focusing on turning that into information. Geospatial, we just have the added location to it, and that's basically it. Of course, that provides a lot of extra functionality, but BI and GIS actually have a lot in common, so that's why we want to bring these things together. And a lot of people don't really care whether it's GIS or BI. They don't, they just want data. They just want an answer to the question they ask. So what we've done is actually have a plugin within the MicroStrategy, which is our platform. So when you actually look at that sort of data, so that's actually the same data as the data on the left. But I believe that the data on the right is a little bit easier to interpret than the data on the left. So, and that's out-of-the-box software. The analysts can do this themselves. All they need is some sort of a location, an XY coordinate, or let long in their data, and they can actually build that map themselves quite easily themselves. So we don't need a specialist to create these maps for them. It's all done through, and this is actually done within the BI tools, not even within the GIS tools. So 88 pages with rows of data, and instead we actually go to one map with the data at a glance. And if you actually zoom into that, it will break up into the small circles as well. So the vision is that we have actually one data warehouse. So we have underlying maybe the geospatial data warehouse and the enterprise data warehouse for the non-spatial data. But really when it comes down to it, we actually have one logical data warehouse. And we actually house the 2 data warehouses on the same physical box as well, so they're different database instances, but actually makes it a lot easier to integrate these things at a technical level. So, and then, of course, we have all our transactional databases sort of in a separate instance as well, and some ETL processes to actually go from there to there. And the ETL processes themselves, the scripts, they're actually versioned as well, so that we can actually say later on, if something not quite right with the data or there's questions about it, we can actually go back and say, well, this is the source data and this is the script that was used to actually, go from there to there. So it's quite a good way of doing things, we believe. And master data, mentioned before as well. So I said we have various systems across MPI, and when the border, for instance, ports, when actually at the border control, or whether the compliance officers, or whether the trade people actually talk about ports, we didn't always talk about the same things. And we did an initial match, it was about a year ago, to different data sets, which all had the UN port codes in there, but we had a 16% match between them, which was pretty poor. So actually using the master data system to link these data sets together, so to actually determine what is actually the right code and what is actually mapping the various data sets together. So we use the master data set for that. Countries, the same thing, and because we actually monitor trade across the globe as well, sort of where does meat, dairy, seafood go to, China, Europe, the States, whatever. And to do that, to actually have proper statistics and actually visualize it in the right way, we actually need to know that we actually talk about the same countries that statistics talks about as well, because we've got a lot of the statistics data, of course, from the Department of Statistics. Organisms, that is probably the most complex one we could think of, because scientists amongst you will know that an organism, sort of how that's defined, is quite complicated, and it changes over time as well when different things are discovered. So actually we're trying to use the moment we're sort of in an exploratory phase to say how are we actually going to do this, because organisms are so complex to do that, but we think that the master data system, that's one way of actually tackling that. And GeoS metadata, and later on other metadata as well, because how are we actually going to bring it out? And the Esri systems we have is pretty good at capturing metadata, but it's not very good at sharing metadata. Actually getting it out on a viewer is actually pretty hard. So we actually, and if you're not using an Esri viewer, then it's even harder. So we're actually looking at sort of a common platform across MPI, which not just the GIS, but also the BI, other data for metadata, have a common metadata standard across everything. So, and we're trying to do that through the master data program. So that program is just kicked off. I mean, we just had the kick-off meeting sort of like a month ago, so it's very early days, but it's an important part of this whole, the underlying capability program. So the key message is, suppose that these programs of work need to be integrated, and it needs to actually be led from a single overarching strategy. So that's quite important. Work prioritization is another quite important thing as well, because you might have gathered that there's a lot of work going on and a lot of dashboards. We sort of anticipate that we've got in the BI, we've got about 30 or 40 various dashboards and reporting systems at the moment. Within the geospatial systems, we're working on the first 5 at the moment. We just started, but we're probably going to have over 100 in a year's time. So actually, how do we prioritise that work? So we actually got a data and information working group, and actually the prioritisation actually is done through that as well. So first of all, we look what's the effort required. If it's something that we can do in a couple of days, then we might just do it. But if it's something that actually requires a bit more resource in a project by itself, then it will actually be prioritised sort of at a governance level. What are we going to do first, and what can wait, and where do we get the biggest bang for our buck, really? So in summary, sort of the work we do is actually covered by an established program of work, which actually comes out of the ISSP and the data and information strategy. So it linked through the organisational priorities, through the those strategies, and really the phases we're in at the moment is actually building the common capability platform. Master data is quite important, work prioritisation, and we sort of suppose, well, we will never finish, but we sort of done the sort of the basic building blocks, but now we're starting the next phase to actually integrate those various building blocks together. So that's what I sort of had to say, and yeah, any questions?
Thank you.
Stunned silence.
André,
Yep.
what's the resourcing that MPI has invested into your quite comprehensive system?
In terms of resourcing, in terms of people, or?
People, what's the type of budget or resourcing that you've put around this? Because it seems really impressive what you've done and where you're going.
Yeah, sort of, not sure whether I can answer everything. Sort of the BI and the geospatial team, there's probably about 20 people in there. Sort of the BI team is slightly larger. That includes some other contractors as well. Sort of 6 people in the BI team that's working constantly on running out the dashboards, and then we've got a series of contractors and people from the development team within MPI as well. The geospatial, we've got also 6 people within my team, which is looking at the program we just talked about. There's another geospatial team within MPI, which is in another department, which I don't look after. They are actually doing the manual mapping and the actual analysis side of things. In some ways, we're trying to do them out of work, but in reality, what we're trying to do is get them away from the mundane map making and the simple map making, and really automate that so that they can concentrate on that higher level analysis. And then of course we use external contractors. So we've got a panel of providers, which ICT panel of providers with subgroups within the geospatial and business intelligence as well. So there's three companies on the geospatial, which is Eagle Technology, eSpatial, and GBS. So they're working with them, and so sometimes I've got all 3 companies at the same time actually working in the office, quite hectic. The business intelligence, there's Datacom on there, there's Stellar, there's Optimation, and there's a couple of others as well. So actually using external resources there as well. I suppose the bit that the first bit is about $1 million to get actually for the geospatial platform where we are now. So in terms of servers, it's about 12 or 13 servers in there, sort of physical service, and it's about 900,000, I think, to get there. The BI is sort of a similar size, and the next phase for the geospatial is another $1 million. So we're talking, reasonable amount of money, but it is MPI is quite a lot. I mean, 135 people in IT in MPI, in BTIS. So it's.
Given you've spent so much money on it, can we pinch it? Or use it?
Well, yeah. The reason we do that is actually to share information. So we're quite keen to participate in the spatial data infrastructure to actually push services out and sharing services. So certainly, yes.
You've got a very busy program of work there. I'm just wondering how you go about your business cases, or your prioritisation of that work to get hold of that budget, I guess.
So the main business case for the geospatial program was made about a year ago, or that was actually when I got it through in November. It sort of took me about 6 months to build the case, but it was really looking at the strategic priorities of the organisation. And if you say, for instance, one of the strategic priorities of MPI is the biosecurity. Okay? If you're serious about biosecurity, we need to know where the threats come from. We need to analyse where there's this situational awareness, where are the things actually very geospatial. So actually that was quite an underpinning part of the business case. So we actually used some benefits mapping as well to actually say, okay, if you do this, this is an initiative like building a platform. The outcome is we have this capability. If you have this capability, then the business benefit will be we can respond faster, we can have better analysis, we can make better decision, and that then leads to whatever the organisational priority is. If you can't make that link, then the business case is not complete. So I spent quite a lot of time to do that. And, I can talk for hours on that, which I won't. But
Any more questions out there?
okay.
Ben just wants to know when you're going to ship it down.
Yeah, give me a DVD and I put it on. Yeah. Okay.